Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Soshing with Suntwe. Today we've got a panel discussion where I've got some good mates and we're going to be talking about mental health in men. For those of you who don't know, Soshing with Suntwe, Soshing is a slang word in Zimbabwe which means socializing. So Soshing with my mates here. It's a conversation, it's not an interview. We're just going to talk and explore different perspectives. Suntwe, that's my nickname that I was given on the Zambezi. It's a Tonga word which means hyena. There's a long story about that. If you want to know more about that, then you can read about it in the Chronicles of Suntwe on my website. But yeah, let's not waste too much time. For those of you who have been with us before, there's a slight change to the format. We are now doing the live exclusively through the Soshing with Suntwe Facebook group. So add your friends to the group if they don't know about that. We're not doing it publicly anymore. This is exclusively for you guys that have joined the group and supported, and you get the privilege of being available and get the advantage of being able to interact with the show. So that's wonderful. If you're already there, drop us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know what's going on. I'm just trying to locate it on the Facebook at the moment so that I can see your comments and see who's there and all the rest of it. So yeah, whilst I'm busy stuffing around, just give us a comment on the side there. I can see there's 3 of you so far, which is fabulous. Right, I think I found it. Here we go. Right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Greg, Jim, and Barend. Greg is a business coach and author. He's written 26 books so far. Very, very accomplished. He's from Bristol in the UK. We've got Jim from the US. You're in Florida, are you, Jim?
That's right, Miami, Florida.
And Jim is an entrepreneur and traveler who I met through his travels when he came through Vic Falls. He stayed at my house. And Barend is a base jumper and business analyst who's currently in the US, but from South Africa, around Centurion type of area. And from where?
Potch.
Oh, from Potchefstroom. Sorry, my bad. Barend and I met through adventure sports stuff a few years ago when I was chatting to him about the brand Raw Adrenaline that I founded. And we've decided to come from our different backgrounds and different perspectives and start talking about mental health in men. And it seems it's quite a hot topic at the moment. A lot of people are talking about mental health, especially in men, and the stigmas that are attached to it, and the stigmas that are attached to it specifically for men. How men have always grown up to do the stiff upper lip and bottle up the feelings. And we want to open up that conversation, open up the dialogue, and see what we can chat about. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. I see someone's reacted with an angry face at the Paula Einhorn. I'm not sure if that was a mistake or not. But if you're angry this early on in the conversation, then I don't know.
Yeah. You might want to leave.
I'm pretty sure that was an error though. Like, it's easy to misfire on those. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, like, I don't know about your guys' particular experience, but I grew up in Zimbabwe, and growing up there, it was always it's a bit of a macho culture. It's a very much boys don't cry. When you hurt yourself, when you're going through things, when you're trying to process life as a kid, it's a very much toughen up buttercup type of environment. And as a result, I don't know. I like to think that my parents weren't really like that, but the system and the culture was very much like that. I don't know what it was like growing up for you guys. What do you reckon, Greg?
For me, I grew up in a household. There was 5 kids and no dad, really. So it's me and 3 brothers and a sister, and so we basically helped each other. So I learned a lot from them, but also when they left, because they were a bit older, I learned most from my mum. So I guess I adopted a lot of her behaviors and traits and things. And So that led me to be somebody who was, I guess, quite sensitive in some ways, and not necessarily in a good way, because I always felt fear, or I was worried or depressed or anxious, because I absorbed all of that. So it took me many years to learn or teach myself how to not always be emotionally led and to sort of think logically and rationally. So I just went through a whole process of self-discovery through necessity. It wasn't like I said, I'm going to get into personal growth or self-growth. I actually had to read books to really survive, to teach myself different things and overwrite patterns which weren't supporting me, or serving me. And so that's essentially my story. And I've never stopped learning and growing from there, really.
What was like in the US there, Jim?
The U.S. definitely has a bit of a macho culture at times. The American dream is kind of defined as, building a business or being a go-getter and creating financial resources so that you could provide for your family. And, the older version of being a man is like, how much money do you make? And how big is the house that you're able to provide for your family and your wife and your children? And it's very, even to this day, manhood is very largely defined by what you do and what you have, and not as much by who you are. So those are a lot of the ideas that I grew up with. And my mom always encouraged me and my two brothers. I'm one of three brothers. She always encouraged us to, talk about our feelings. And when I was about 7 years old, my parents separated. So they divorced. So I was my mother's influence was very strong. And that developed a more sensitive side of me as well. I think it served me in a lot of ways, though, because it helped me kind of just be more in touch with my feelings and being more willing to talk with them, be it with a small group. It took me a long time to grow up and build the courage to do that with a broader group of people. But just an interesting set of influences between home life and American society as a whole.
Very interesting. Barend, South Africa, I would imagine, is very similar to how I grew up.
Yeah, we grew up with that whole thing. If it's not bleeding, it doesn't hurt, and boys don't cry, and all that. My story is a little bit different. I have a family history of mental illnesses. For example, one of my cousins, which were very close to me, he committed suicide at the age of 18 because of his depression and so forth, and it runs in the family. I myself am diagnosed with a few conditions, which I'm actively controlling with medication. So it's not always easy, and it's something that needs to be talked about, because people don't realize that it's something that's like diabetes or whatever. It's an illness. It's not something that you can just get over, because the normal thing is when you feel down or you're going through one of the motions, then it's like, don't worry, you'll get over it, or just don't think about it. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
So, from a first-hand experience, because you as you said, you live with a condition already. I know I have first-hand experience from my own perspective of depression type thing. I don't know if it's to the same level, of course, because I'm not medicated, and it wasn't a long-term thing, but I went through a really, really dark phase in my life. And for me, what I've noticed in my own encounters in my own life is that my mental health is very, very closely related to my diet, because I have various food allergies, and my diet and my health. So if I let my diet go and I let my health go and I don't exercise, my mind follows very quickly, and it becomes a very poor downward spiral, where as the mind goes, the diet gets worse, the lifestyle gets worse, the mind gets worse as a result, and and it just becomes this vicious circle that just becomes this complete, out of control spiral. And it takes a lot, because as anyone who's been in a depressed state before, you will realize you get into a bit of a pit of despair, where to pull yourself out of it takes a lot. Like, it's a really, really difficult place to, a lot of people are like, oh, just pull yourself together, man, or oh, just go to the gym, man. Some days you can't even get out of bed. I think a lot of people don't understand how depression or any type of mental illness can actually manifest and affect you physically, on a physical level. Like, your body aches and your energy levels are just not there just to even get up to go to the kitchen. You sometimes don't eat. So can you give us a bit more insight on your personal experience on that side of things?
So my condition itself is a chemical one. So I have a chemical imbalance, and that causes my depression, if you want to call it like that. And what people don't realize is that all of us suffer from depression in some other way during our lives, because in today's lifestyle, we get burnout. Now, there's a difference between burnout and depression. Burnout has lots of the same symptoms, but it's a momentary thing in time. So once you adjust your lifestyle, like you said, the gut has a lot to do with it, and the way you work and prioritize, then you can get past it. And then when it comes to the clinical part of depression, sometimes one can try and cope with it as good as possible. I did it for quite a few years without medication for various reasons, and at some stage you kind of think, okay, well, I'm doing this. You still have your ups and downs, but it's not as obvious to people around you, because you're putting up that mask. And then just one day you get to a breaking point, and then you can't do it on your own anymore. Then you need a little bit of intervention to kind of just put you back on the correct path, because it's in that moment where you feel like, okay, the world's not right anymore. I don't belong here. I'm not making a difference. All those kinds of thoughts come along. And what I really think people don't realize is how many people are out there that, because of the way we live today, suffer from symptoms and actual depressional states. Something that's always interesting to me is like friends in the Northern Hemisphere, up high, cold, it's seasonal depressor.
SAD, isn't it? It's called SAD.
Yeah, SAD. And it's quite remarkable when talking to friends as the seasons change, and then you'll notice that something's off. And loads of people don't want to admit it, but that's depression that comes. It's that change in seasons. It's the lack of social activity. It's all those kinds of things. So it can take many forms, and not all of them needs to be medicated. But if one doesn't look out for the symptoms or the signs of it, it can become very bad very quickly.
Greg, do you have any personal sort of can you relate to it on a personal level as well, or is it strictly from work side of things?
Yeah, I can actually. Yeah, because I think that I was always a depressed kid, and so I grew up with it. And I started realizing very quickly on that I'd go to the darker side of things a lot, and I'd be up one minute, down the next, but I've never been diagnosed. So there were things that I'd looked at myself, and I could tell what I was suffering from, which was partly to do with identity, inferiority kind of complex as a kid, anxiety and panic attacks, which lasted for quite a few years. And they can make you depressed because you feel like hiding and you can't face anybody, because you just get these awful feelings. So I think for me, it was about trying to understand, whilst, as Barend says, we're all different. Every one of us has got different experiences, different genetic makeup. And so there's different types of depression, which some can be brought on by traumas. And certainly that was a part of what happened for me, was certain traumas. So I tried to work on changing the imagery that I was looking back at, which affected me, working with trying to, I guess, dissolve some of the stuff that made me unhappy and altering my perspective of myself and my ability and that kind of thing. So it was a gradual process of trying to rewire some things, but also, you know, implementing lots of new things like exercise and drinking more water and just trying to do everything I could, really.
Just before we continue, just addressing everybody who's watching, if someone could just drop a comment, because I have a funny feeling that when we broadcast to the group now, that comments are not working for some reason. So, because I'm not seeing any comments, and there is a notification here about me not being able to post a comment. So if that's the case, then in future we'll have to go back to the other one. You'll have to just excuse us, guys. The whole thing is a learning curve. I've never done this stuff before, so this I didn't go to school for it. So this has all been a learning curve. This has all been a bit of an experiment, and I just thought I would make it more exclusive for you. But okay, I've got one comment says "How's it?" but it's from Facebook user. It doesn't. Oh, it's Ashley de Bourbon. Okay, so I can see on my computer, I can see Ashley de Bourbon saying "How's it?" but on here, it literally just says Facebook user. How's it? So I can identify you from watching on my other computer, but I can't identify you in this feed. But for some reason, Val Chikali, I can. She says, "Hi, Paul." So, yeah, if you're there, just drop a comment and say hi, just so I know you're there, just so that we can see that it's all working, that we can acknowledge you, and yeah, get involved. Please add your bits to the conversation, add your questions. We want to talk to everybody. This is not just about us. We want to open this. We want to open this dialogue as much as possible.
Just want to say, sorry, but have you clicked on comments, or are you in private chat?
No, I'm in comments.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I just moved across to that so I can see everybody's stuff. I didn't know whether you were in that or not, but cool.
Yeah, and it looks like the angry face is gone. Thanks, Paula.
I just want to touch up on what Greg said, and PTSD is a very common thing, and I think it's more common than people would actually want to acknowledge, especially in today's life, because we go daily and we get desensitized by violence on television and news, etc. So when something traumatic happens to you, like a home invasion or a hijacking or anything along that line, and it doesn't even need to be something like that. It can be just a very traumatic experience. The impact it has on you subconsciously manifests. And if you don't talk about it and deal with it, over a long period of time, you'll start to notice symptoms like anxiety form and night terrors and stuff like that. And I think that's something that people look over, because once again, it comes to that thing about, I'm fine. I don't need to talk to anybody about it. It's just something that happened. It's just another day. And I think acknowledging the trauma is the first step towards avoiding long-term mental illness or mental issues, and just working through it.
Absolutely.
Totally brilliant, yeah.
So this brings us to what we were saying before we started the broadcast. The importance of having friends that you can talk to and having people that you can go to. When I was going through my darkest hour, shall we say, 2 years ago or whenever it was, I literally felt alone. You don't want to talk to the ones closest to you that you can't be seen to be crumbling in front of the ones you're supporting. It's a tough situation, especially as a man who's a breadwinner, who's supporting others, who's got family, who's trying to always put on the brave face, and then having peers who are other tough men who look at you as a tough guy, and not wanting to show the vulnerability to those people for fear of ridicule, for fear of breaking the facade of that toughness and all the rest of it. So I'm lucky enough that I've got such a diverse network of friends all around the world, and people like Jim, for instance, are the type of people that I would go to in those situations. Jim, where I like to think we're close, but we're also just far enough removed that it's easy to be vulnerable, because the stakes are not immediately high within your own community. Greg has also become that kind of friend for me since I've been in the UK, and him and I chat a lot online, and I think it's very important. And since I've become friends with Greg, he's put together a group called the Code of Man on Facebook, which is basically a type of support group. But I'll let Greg elaborate on that if you'd like to talk more about that, Greg.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's basically just a group on Facebook where, I thought that it'd be nice to create for men to be able to talk to each other, or at least feel empowered and get back some control if they feel out of control. Because just as all of these wonderful gentlemen have been talking about, we're all different, and we've all got different things in our pasts and different chemicals and so on and so forth. But at least if there's somewhere where someone can feel that they're listened to, they don't always want advice, people, they just want somewhere where they feel acknowledged. And as you quite rightly said, people can feel lonely or isolated. So the goal is to make sure that I'm always there answering stuff or posting stuff and responding and just checking up on people, really. So, if anyone's interested in joining that, by all means, come along.
We'll put the link in the comments, or we'll post it in the group, as we'll post that group in the main group. So whoever wants to join the Code of Man, happy days. The more the merrier, I guess. And what's that? You're in.
Count me in. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great group. There's literally Greg's very active on it as well, and there's literally something of value that's posted at least once a day. I mean, he posts there like 3-4 times a day in minimum, from what I've noticed. So, I mean, there hasn't been a day gone by that I haven't found some value in that group. So I would encourage anybody to get involved.
From personal experience, I just want to say a group like that makes a lot of sense, and it's more approachable, because when you talk to people around you that know you and you have interacting with, the natural tendency is to try and fix things. So if you're going through something and you're just talking about it, everybody tries to fix it, and it's not something that they can fix. It's something you have to deal with, and thus making it harder for you to talk to them about it, because as soon as you open up and talk about it, they all try and come with, no, but do this or do that, and that's not the way it works. And then the other side of it is people don't necessarily know how to handle it or deal with it. We're having somebody that's in a depressed state or has a condition in their life. And then what I've noticed from personal experience is people tend to distance themselves. And so it all depends on the individual themselves. If they have a reference framework to having dealt with it themselves or in the family, they tend to be more open to it. But in general, people distance themselves, and then they avoid interaction because they don't know how to deal with it from their own perspective. And that can once again cause that feeling of abandonment that we described earlier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And excuse me. The one thing I just want to go back to with what you said, it's a massive thing for me in my life, is not trying to fix it. Don't try and fix the problem that I'm talking about. All I want to do is talk, be acknowledged, have some empathy, get through it, talk myself through it, and as a result, I feel like I'm capable of solving my problems. I'm not looking for a solution. I'm just looking for understanding. And a lot of the time when somebody tries to fix the problems, it becomes annoying. So, and then you want to retract and you don't want to talk, and you end up going into yourself, and then it can be a downward spiral from there. So I think that's a massively good piece of advice that Barend's brought to the table. Is I know it's hard, but just try not to fix. Try just to listen.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of you can agree that sometimes we just need to vent. We just need a soundboard. But because by verbally expressing the emotions and thoughts, you solve your own problems by putting them out there and just verbalizing them. Because that's sometimes all you need to do is verbalize them for yourself so you can try and make sense of them. And people don't always get that we just need to vent.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's it.
I think it's also really good point, by the way. I totally agree. I actually learned that concept reading this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, years ago. I was having trouble communicating with my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, how do I communicate better? And they use this analogy in the book, which was sometimes when somebody is hurt, not just men, but sometimes when somebody is hurt, they go into their cave and they need to lick their wounds and figure things out and feel better. And sometimes it's best not to follow them into the cave, but rather wait at the entrance and just let them know you're there. When they're ready to come out and talk, you're there. You don't have to chase them in there. And I learned that was one way that helped me communicate with people, not only like from both ends. Like sometimes I've found it's important to tell people what you need in that moment. Like, and also if you have the energy to also ask them, do you have capacity for this conversation right now? I'm not going to dump all my emotional baggage on you necessarily, but I like to ask people for permission to share. And sometimes people are in a stable place to be able to make space for you. And sometimes they're dealing with their own situation, or they're in a cave right now. And so you give them that opportunity to say, I wish I could, have this conversation with you right now, but maybe not yet, So I think it's kind of like a two-way street. It's important for us to have the courage to share our feelings. But it's also helpful when we know somebody, which is why a group like Greg's is so great. It's important to know that the person can make space for us in that situation. And they're, does that make sense? I think that's kind of an important piece to add to the equation.
Fantastic point there. And you can relate to it as well visually, because, that's what's useful to people, isn't it? Is being able to see where you're coming from there and how to feel okay with that. Because, yeah, you're right. I think I've been with my missus 23 years, and there are days when sometimes one of us doesn't talk or communicate, and it's easy to jump to that place of going, oh, he's not listening to me, or she's not listening to me. And over time, that can wear someone down and can lead to a divorce, or, and so I try to approach that angle from a sense of understanding. Is maybe she's tired today, and she's just focusing on something else. So I try and come from a place of acceptance of the situation rather than a criticism, more of a curiosity, I suppose. That certainly helps me, and may help others in relationships. Because some people, it is tricky. Yeah, it's very tricky. But I always think to myself, if the person that loves me, who's chosen to be with me, hasn't got any maliciousness towards me, they've chosen to be with me. Therefore, they're probably not, ignoring me through spite or through some kind of thing. And if they are, maybe it's the wrong relationship, right? But certainly I know the person I'm with, I suppose, as good as anybody now. But I'm always prepared to be open to being flexible to things and not getting too stuck in my ways, because I think if you get too stuck in your ways with anything, you can then think you know everything, and you end up knowing nothing. I've already learned so much today from you guys. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's what it's about at the end of the day, because you compare notes and see what works, keep what works, and bin what doesn't, eh?
Right.
And that's one thing that I see a lot in your group as well. When you do your post, you say, well, this is what's worked for me, what works for you guys, and you see different perspectives from different people. So like I've commented and say, well, this actually works for me, and another person, well, this actually works for me, and you nitpick what you think will work for you, give it a bash. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, don't.
Exactly. It's like if something's working in like in business, scale it up, increase it, grow it how you want to grow it, with the right resources. And actually, our minds are such wonderful things, that we vastly underestimate their capability, don't we? And if there are ways where we can use that creativity, and I know, like you guys have mentioned, if you're in a situation which is difficult, it's very, very easy to go to a place of difficulty or thinking that it's the worst case scenario. But if you can think creatively how to respond differently to that and start to create a habit out of that supports you, then maybe it can help change your life,
Absolutely. Barend, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to get back to the stigma part, and specifically when it comes to psychologists and psychiatrists. Society has, through television shows and movies, stigmatized it a lot as somebody where you go and you lay on a couch and then you talk about your problems and it's like, how are you feeling, etc. And very few people that haven't been to such a doctor or a professional have that mental image, and that's not actually how it works. The main purpose there is to take you through your situation and diagnose the cause behind it. And as with everything, it's not something that if you just feel like this for a week now you've got a condition. It's something that's over a long period of time with patterns, etc. And by going to see a professional, it's not a sign of weakness. It's just acknowledging that you have a problem. So we can kind of compare it to going to an AA meeting. It's like the first step is acknowledging. You have to acknowledge that something's not right, and then seek the correct professional help for it. And by going to that person or individual, a professional, you can look at your situation and go through a few things and try exercises and try some anti-anxiety medication or other forms of chemical hormone rebalancing or whatever you want to call it, and try and address the situation. Because trust me, for somebody that's lived with their whole life and gone through multiple different stages, it's one of the hardest things to do is to go to one of these professionals and say, listen, I'm not capable of coping with it on my own anymore, and we need to try some things. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, well, it's making things a little easier. It doesn't necessarily fix the problem, but it does make coping with it a lot easier than you would on your own.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's that same thing though. That acknowledgement that there is something wrong is probably the hardest step for anything, whether it's like depression or anxiety, or it's as hard as admitting you have an addiction of some kind. It's that first acknowledgement is the hardest part, and that's where I was 2 years ago. It's almost 2 years ago. Like by the end of 2018 was a rough year for me. It was like probably the hardest. I had a bit of a downward spiral from 2015 going all the way to 2018, and the end of 2018 being the pits. And it was only at the beginning of 2019 where I really pulled myself together again and started making, where I really acknowledged, right, there's actually something seriously wrong here and I need to sort my shit out, because, and it manifested in my body, in my health. I was overweight and just not getting anything done. And that acknowledgement was almost a breaking point, and it was a make or break moment. And I don't know if you've, Barend, or any of you guys have got some kind of words of wisdom for anybody who gets to that point, how to deal with that acknowledgement and move forward and get the help or or make the steps to move forward from that point.
I think it's important to look at our beliefs, and more specifically, what is our belief about what it means to be a man, to be a masculine man? I think that, we were talking earlier about the influence of our societies. No matter how much our mother or fathers may have taught us, that the influence of society is so powerful. And, a lot of us, it sounds like all of us grew up in very masculine, machismo societies. And so I think for a lot of people, it's given us this belief that masculinity is, and then follow that up with a bunch of misguided things. Like masculinity, it means not talking about your problems because then you don't seem like you got your stuff together. Masculinity is, you make more money than the neighbor. Masculinity is, whatever, you're cool, whatever. I think so. I totally agree. The starting point is awareness. Until we pull things from our subconscious to our consciousness, it will run our life, and we will call it fate.
Do you know what? Do you know? Sorry to interrupt you, Jim, but I was just thinking as you were saying that, it's almost like, you know, the social media culture of living the highlight reel. It's almost an outward expression of what masculinity is, because the masculine thing is to always project the outward facade of everything's fine and I've got this, whilst burying all the other shit. And it's the same as if you look at a social media profile. It's always the highlight, but you don't see the struggle behind it. So I think that just triggered a sort of a metaphor in my head of looking at it like that. So sorry to derail.
Yeah, really good point. No, I would love to touch on that too. The last thing I had about the other point was just that it does have to start with self-awareness. And I think it's important to just ask ourselves, how am I defining what it means to be a man? And not calling it good or bad, not calling it right or wrong, just seeing it for what it is. And then asking ourselves, is this serving me? Where has this gotten me? Like this, my current set of beliefs have gotten me to this point in my life. And if I continue to have these beliefs, it's going to give me the same outcomes in the future. So do I want a different outcome or not? If I don't, cool, you're good. But if you want to make changes, then it's important to look at the beliefs, because that's kind of at the core. And you can't look at your beliefs until you have self-awareness. And then when you have self-awareness, you have choice. Choice is one of the most powerful things that we have, in my opinion. And to touch on the point of social media, whatever we focus our intention on is what becomes our reality. So if we're constantly viewing the highlight reel of everybody else's life, we're going to have this false construct of what reality is, and we're going to compare ourselves to the highlight reel and feel less than. And of course, on social media, you see, on the topic of men, you see men with cars and, girls on boats and all this stuff. And it's just like, this is where young men's minds are being shaped and influenced. And so I think that's a really good point you bring up. And I think it's important to just bring up more conversations like this. And I actually do want to call out something that was very amazing that I saw, which was, I like reggaeton music.
Oh yeah, me too.
I live in Miami. One of the biggest reggaeton stars in the world is J Balvin. And his music videos are full of girls and cars, and he's such a cool dude. He's like this pinnacle of cool man. And he recently came out and told people that he was dealing with depression on Instagram to his millions of followers. And I was just so touched by that, because I realized, like, especially I would venture to say that Latin culture is one of the most macho cultures, living in it here in Miami. And for that guy, a role model to so many young men, come out and say he was depressed was so touching to see. And I think that, as we talk about some of the challenges people are facing, like, I think I wanted to add that example in there, because I just thought it was so wonderful that he did that. And it gave people something that's not part of the highlight reel. It gave people a little bit of the reality, the other part of the iceberg, per se.
Absolutely. Talking about someone like that as well, is that, so in my own personal experience, I got into a bit of a vicious, a negative feedback loop in myself, because when I was going through that dark time, I was essentially living the dream. Like, I hate this, but I keep doing it. For those of you who are listening to this later on the podcast, I'm doing a lot of air quotes, and it's making me look like an idiot, but that's fine. But
That's fine.
I had this thing in my head that I'm living the dream and I'm depressed, and I don't deserve to be depressed because I'm living the dream. I live on the most beautiful river in the world, right next to the greatest waterfall on the planet. I kayak every day. I see elephants and buffalo every day. I do whatever I want every day, and yet for some reason I'm not happy, and I don't deserve to not be happy. And it really put me into a serious negative feedback loop that just made me even worse because I felt like I didn't deserve it. And I can imagine someone like what's his name?
J Balvin.
Yeah, like him would be having all the cars, all the women, all the boats, all the money, all the everything, and still not feeling happy. It's got to be like, you get to that point where you're like, what the hell is life about? Why am I here? If I've ticked all the boxes and I'm still not happy, what the hell am I supposed to do next? And
sorry, I was going to say, what are those boxes? Like Jim was saying as well, and it's been touched on the fact that what are we actually chasing to feel fulfilled and satisfied and happy by? Because if we're always looking for something, it's like instant gratification that, because we can get access to everything now so easily. I'm going to buy something on Amazon because it make me feel good.
So that's what you just said. What are the boxes? So, and you said, what is the fulfillment? So that's where I've come back to, and I've said it a lot in the past podcasts, where happiness is bullshit. It's for kids. If you're chasing happiness is temporary, and it comes from external gratification, and it's transient. It happens. You want to be happy, eat an ice cream. When the ice cream's finished, you're not happy anymore. It's as simple as that. But the key is for fulfillment. And the mind shift that I had in myself, which changed things a lot. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about a medical situation here. We're talking about, I guess, a self-inflicted down in the dumps depression, self-inflicted to some extent, where it's internal. Was two things that I realized. I realized I was entitled, and I realized that I was searching for happiness instead of fulfillment. And only when I decided that I give up entitlement where I could, was when I started to realize that fulfillment was the way forward. And fulfillment comes from discomfort, and discomfort comes from growth. Growth comes from discomfort. Fulfillment comes from growth. And the only way to actually become fulfilled is to do something with purpose. And things with purpose normally come from a deeper intrinsic value. So you need to identify your values, what you're trying to achieve in the world from a value perspective rather than a material perspective. You can do whatever you want materially, as long as it's going towards your values, you can find fulfillment. And the difference between fulfillment and happiness is like making love versus having a wank. Like for lack of a better analogy, like going and kayaking on the river every day was like just having a wank every day. It's completely self-serving, has no purpose, no value, and therefore was unfulfilling, although it was living the dream.
Quick buzz.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge Donna Tippler and her comment here. She says, Paul, I feel you and appreciate your thing in your head, living in the dream and Zim, and you've achieved all this awesome stuff. As a wife of a husband who works in a big corporate company in Zimbabwe, and to watch and see him. Thanks, Donna. Thank you for your comment.
So
Donna,
Paul, I want to touch on the social media thing again.
Sorry?
I just want to touch on the social media thing again. And it's very true that you see everything and all this has an influence. And I think what people don't realize is it's okay to take a break. If you disconnect yourself from social media, delete that app from your phone, or log out and just distance yourself for a bit, you'll come to a few what's the best way to describe it? Realizations that everything that you see isn't always the way it is. And just by distancing, because what I can say is once you get into that groove of looking at your phone like a few times a day, logging into Instagram, and then you see all these things and you're like, well, I'm stuck here doing this, or I'm at this job and everybody else is having fun. I want to have fun. And then it kind of manifests. So
right.
just by realizing it, everything isn't always as it seems. And even perhaps doing a little bit of a social media break could change your view quite a lot.
Absolutely. So one of the other things that was key in my transformation, shall we say, was I decided to take a complete control over my life in what I consume, not just in like food, but everything I consume that goes into me needs to have benefit towards my life. So I cleaned up my diet. That was the first thing I did. And then the second thing I did was to go and stop consuming any sort of negative media or anything that does not benefit my goals in some way. So I stopped. I will tell you right now that I've relapsed and I'm not in that really disciplined state right now where I was under control of my consumption of media like I was last year. Last year, I stopped watching series. I stopped watching TV. I stopped watching any news. I stopped watching anything negative. And I focused only on educational podcasts, educational YouTube videos, anything to do with personal growth that could benefit, anything to do with nutrition, health, all that sort of thing. So everything I was consuming from a mental perspective and from a physical perspective was in line with me achieving what I was set out to achieve. And it made a massive difference. It changed my life, really. So if I was to throw anything out there for anyone to try, I would say start with that. Also, I think there's a lot of diagnosis of conditions happening at the moment prematurely, maybe. I'm not a doctor. The disclaimer I'm going to give you here now is speak to a professional. Obviously, don't listen to what I have to say. But what I would say is, if you haven't checked your diet and checked your lifestyle and checked your health first, do those things first. And if you're still having a problem, go further. I don't know. Barend, maybe you can tell me I'm talking cuck.
No, I agree with you. It's all things that you can start doing by yourself and try and eliminate as much as possible to try and find the cause. And seriously, like I said, some of the issues we're experiencing can just be seasonal. It can be situational. There's a big difference between depression and burnout. And even though some symptoms are the same, it doesn't mean that you have a condition. You can just be going through a very stressful time at work or in your personal life, causing this burnout feeling. And it might represent itself as a depressional state, but it's not. It's temporary. And by making those changes to your lifestyle, you can get yourself out of that. But the thing is to keep track of it and to see the patterns. Because if this is something that doesn't change by changing your diet and lifestyle, it means there's something underlying. And then it's definitely the right thing to do is to reach out to a professional and go and have this discussion and so forth.
Absolutely. Just to acknowledge Donna again. Donna said, sorry, I pushed send before I had finished my comment. My point was, no matter where we are or where we live, men have to man up and own it. Here in Zim, it's hectic. I have big respect for every husband, man, son trying to survive in our country. Big respect. Yeah, thanks, Donna. It is quite tough. And Zim is no joke. She also says, Paul, would you agree that most Zimbo men treat their anxiety and stress with booze? Okay, so I'm not going to say yes or no to that because I don't drink, so I'm lucky in that respect, I suppose. But I do know Zim has a serious drinking culture, and whether I can't attest to whether it's actually to self-medicate with alcohol. Maybe, I don't know, but it could very well be. But it's the drinking culture there's quite serious.
But I want to address that one. Okay, so from the viewpoint of somebody that is going through life with a specific condition and having had the culture of growing up in South Africa, where when you're happy you drink, when you're sad you drink, when you socialize you drink. Booze is a big factor within life there. And I myself have been sober now for just over a year. I worked out that it was 500 something days since I've had a drink.
Congratulations.
And the reason being is I went through some stuff, and the big realization was I get into this cycle. So I'll be down, and then I'll go have a few drinks to feel better, and then alcohol is a natural depressant, and that makes things worse, and it's just a vicious cycle. And so by eliminating that component out of your life, you get the opportunity to just focus on a few other things and try and figure out where that balance is. And I'm not saying drinking is wrong. It's like, if you want to have drinks, have it. Just be aware of what effect it has on you. because if you're already in a depressed state, just adding that third party factor in there can really mess things up, because then you're firstly already suffering from a condition, and now you're adding something on top of it. It makes your judgment very poor, and then it could end quite differently to the way you would have imagined.
I think that's a great point, because I've always had, I don't know if I could call it, there's different labels that people can say that they've had, suffer from, experience, so on and so forth. So I looked at all the things that I possibly could have suffered from or experienced, and then I thought to myself, well, if I get depressed and I have a drink, I'm drinking because I'm depressed or whatever. What I recognized was that drinking heavily, which tends to be very common in the UK, binge drinking and cocaine and things like that, and it seems like there's less satisfaction or fulfillment, as we said. I would be one of those people that would say, what the hell? And that was a phrase I would use when someone said, hey, do you want a drink, Greg? Have another drink. Have another one. And of course, I live somewhere where there's cocktails all the time, and I'd mix like hell different drinks. And I just say, what the hell? I feel great. But then I could quite easily change my mood from that point on. And then someone would say to me, oh, yeah, you're acting totally different than who you are generally. And I was surprised. I was like, really? I acted differently. I wasn't aware of it. And it sort of proved in a way that, as you were saying, Barend, have a drink, have fun at a party or whatever, but also understand that there may be certain things that just don't go with your system. And also, if you can understand how to control your intake, and you can learn how to master that, that might be useful, because it's been useful to me to have a nice glass of wine with fish or a matching red wine with steak and enjoy the experience, or have a coffee, but not become dependent upon it, and recognize the signs, the triggers. And so I've luckily been able to walk away from that. But I know my biological father was an alcoholic, although I didn't really know him. And so I tried to piece together the fact that, maybe there's a genetic inheritance, as well as the behavioral stuff that nature and nurture, growing up with dysfunction or with fears and so on and so forth. So, yeah. And again, as Jim was saying, self-awareness is, I think, the key or the core thing here, to be aware of, really, of yourself and how you act and the decisions you make, and how you can slightly just tweak a few things here and there. You can make a massive difference to your life, But
to build on that again, Greg, like alcohol is an obvious one, but
yeah,
I don't drink, and I know that my biggest trigger for downward spiral mentally is actually my allergy to wheat. Right. And I've got a gluten intolerance, and it's a real thing. It's not a fatty thing. It's and one of the major symptoms that I get is extreme depression if I consume wheat. And that's obviously related to my microbiome. And because of when I consume that, it messes with my microbiome in my stomach, and your gut's known these days as your second brain. And it really has a massive impact on my physical, not just my mental state, but my physical ability to do anything. I get lethargic, my joints start to hurt, and I go into a very bad state and for me with wheat consumption, it's not acute, it's cumulative. So if I eat one slice of bread today, tomorrow I'll wake up like I've got a hangover, like someone who's had a few too many beers. If I eat wheat consecutively, it accumulates, and I get a cumulative problem where I get more depressed and more lethargic, and I start to exhibit like serious inflammation. And that's where my downward spiral really happens to start off with, is the dietary side of things. So that's just me with a gluten intolerance. There are many other food allergies and intolerances, and sugar is a massive poison, and alcohol is really just fermented sugar. So sure. They affect you in very similar ways. And I would encourage people to try and acknowledge and see what their intolerances are as well, and what kind of allergies and food intolerances they have, because your microbiome has a massive impact on your mental state as well. Just to add to something else in case it's not a diagnosed issue.
It's a great point.
One of the things, yeah, great point, Paul. And to add to that as well, one of the things that's really helped me build my self-awareness about what makes me feel good and what doesn't make me feel good has been journaling. I think that's another thing that's not so talked about, like a man writing in his diary every day. What? I started that in November, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made in the last year, because it's almost like, and I have the same questions I answer every day. And some of them are like, what's a moment that I really appreciate? At the end of the day, I'll write, what's a moment that I really appreciated about today? What is something I learned about myself today? What is something I learned about others today? And just those types of questions. And what happens is that over time, you answer the same questions and you start to recognize patterns. That's when I started to recognize one of my patterns of good things is that I loved having conversations with people about just being vulnerable and talking about feelings and topics like this. I realized that's one of my favorite things. So I got into coaching. I didn't know that that's something I really wanted to do until I started reflecting on my life. And then one of the things, I started recognizing the things that didn't make me feel good were when I ate too late in the day. If I ate within an hour of bed, I'd wake up feeling kind of groggy. So it's just a tip for people listening that want to build their self-awareness is to come up with some kind of ritual, like some kind of journaling every day, or score how you feel each day, just something like that. It will really, I was very surprised. And I'm somebody who never journaled ever before and just started as now. So that's been really helpful. But another point you made, Paul, was about what type of information you consume. And the information diet is just as important as the food diet. And because the information diet is what feeds our mental health, just like the food diet is what feeds our physical health. And so I think, a quote from somebody I look up to, Jim Rohn, is he says, you must stand guard at the gate of your mind. We have to be careful about what information and what influences we let into our mind, because whatever we let it through the gate has power over us. It can influence us. So I'm not saying that we have to block out everything that triggers us all the time, otherwise we're in trouble, but just something that I've been conscious about too. Am I watching mainstream media in the United States? Holy cow, no way. that's just trouble. So what kind of books am I reading? And another part of the influence picture is the people. So who are you spending the time around the most? And what are those people's habits? So if you want to quit drinking or take a break from drinking and all your buddies love happy hours, it's going to be tough, right? So one thing I've done with myself as I became an entrepreneur this year was I want to surround myself with more entrepreneurs and less like corporate folks, not because they're bad, but just because what I learned was if you want to develop a new skill or a new habit, get around people where that's normal. Get around people where that is just a part of their everyday life. And then when something feels normal, we're more likely to do it. Just like in the same way, if a man wants to talk about his feelings more, get in a group like Greg's group, so it feels normal to talk about stuff versus, a different group of people where talking about your feelings is weakness. So just wanted to share that because that's been something that's been really helpful for me in my life.
It's fantastic. I just want to add to that actually, which is that I love that stuff. And I totally agree with you, by actually measuring, and Brent talked about it as well, measuring your progress through a medium in one way or another, you can then see where the patterns lie and adjust lovingly where you need to go. But it's absolutely true what you say, that if you it's kind of obvious in some ways if you hang around with corporate guys and you're in the corporate world and they're like snorting coke and doing shots, like, and you're like, this really isn't for me. So I need to take a cool, sharp exit out of here. But I mean, I went through all that I learned the hard way too many times, doing too many times. And actually learning that you can be an individual, you can be unique and embrace who you are as a person and not follow trends and society that tries to tell us how to believe, think, behave, and everything else. So it's just about sometimes stepping away. And if you can get away into nature, and I drive through Scotland sometimes and just stand looking at the mountains and the colors and everything else, you can then think again properly, can't you, about what your values really are, what really matters to you, and where your focus needs to be. And just as Jim Rohn also said, some things are good, things are easy to do and easy not to do. You've always got a choice. You can keep doing the same things, but it's easy not to as well. It's easy not to necessarily pick up a cigarette or a drink. And if you can get used to doing those little things initially, as you support yourself on the journey, then I think it is possible to make changes,
I just want to touch on something Greg said way in the beginning, and that's about the relationships in your life. And something that people should remember is when you're going through this, whether it be burnout or depression or down at the dump state, inform the people around you of it. You make it clear to them, listen, this is how I'm feeling. It's got nothing to do with you. You're not the reason for it. This is something I'm dealing with myself. I don't need fixing. All I currently need is a little empathy or space or whatever, and that'll make things easier on them as well, because it's much easier if you inform them of what's happening than they see you moping around or not getting out of bed, and people draw conclusions, and then the first instinct is, what did I do wrong? What's going on? And by just helping them, they can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. The more aware they are in what you're going through, the more tools they have to be able to support you in your journey as well. Yeah, totally, Brent.
Right. We have just passed the 1 hour mark. So I just want to say to everybody who's joined us, thank you so much. If you've got anything else you want to input or any comments you want to make, please drop them now, because we're going to start winding this down. For those of you who are listening on the podcast or seeing this on YouTube afterwards, please, if this has added value to your life in any way, or if it's resonated with you, please share it with whoever you think would gain more value from it. But only if it's added value to your life. We're not asking you to share garbage. So share it out, spread the word, encourage others to get involved in dialogue and discussion, and let's just get the love out there and show that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there in the same boat, and a lot of people willing to listen, and a lot of people willing to stand next to you while you process, and hopefully not give advice where advice is not necessary. Just hold space, really. On that note, I think we might be wrapping it up. I don't see any other comments coming in. To tell you as well, we are doing the live broadcasts from Facebook group called Soshing with Suntwe. If you want to be involved in the live broadcasts and you want to be involved in the comments and the interactive part, you need to join the group now, because we are keeping it exclusive to the actual group. And everyone else will get the podcast and the YouTube video at a later date on the next day. But every Wednesday we go live, 7 p.m. CAT. I think as soon as the clocks change and we go out of daylight savings time or go into daylight savings time, I don't know which way around it works, I'm going to change the timing. It's probably going to be 8 p.m. CAT because there's a bigger time gap and all the rest of it. But yeah, for the time being, it's 7 p.m. CAT, 6 p.m. BST, 1 p.m. Florida time, if I'm correct there, Jim.
If we're going to 8 CAT, that's 2 p.m. Florida time, East Coast.
Not
Yep.
when you change the clocks though.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I'm
We'll work it out. At the moment, it's 7 p.m.
1 or 2 p.m.
PST, and Florida time, it's 1 p.m. So we'll see from there, and
Yeah.
work it all out next time. Yeah, thank you to you guys for coming. If you, we'll drop the comment in the comments, the link to Greg's group for anyone who's interested. I think we'll also take this further in the group. We can set up a thread to talk more about this sort of topic, and the four of us will be tagged in that thing so we can respond at any time. I'd like to get that group moving a bit more interactively. So if you're a member of that group, please get involved in the discussions, get involved, post stuff yourself. The group's there for a reason. It's there for a safe place to have difficult conversations, a safe place where we can all discuss things intellectually without getting too wound up in things, and creating a space that's conducive to dialogue and talking and perspectives, looking at difficult things from as many different perspectives as we can possibly have. On that note, thank you so much to Greg and Jim and Barend. It's been amazing having you guys, and I always love chatting to you. So
Thank you.
From all of us here, we are going to bid everybody good night and goodbye.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.